Listen carefully. There is a door you have passed every day of your life, unseen, untouched, unlocked. And behind it waits the version of you who never struggles, never begs, never wonders if life will finally turn in your favor. Tonight, that door opens, not because luck arrives, not because the world changes, but because you remember something ancient about yourself, a truth so simple it was hidden in plain sight, waiting for the moment you were ready to hear it. Florence Scovel Shinn once whispered a radical idea into a fearful world. Life is not happening to you, it is responding through you. And what you impress upon your inner world, quietly, faithfully, consistently, must take form outside of you. Most people never discover this. They exhaust themselves chasing results, begging circumstances, forcing effort, while the law they are working against watches patiently, never arguing, never correcting them, simply obeying. Because life is obedient, terrifyingly obedient. If your days feel heavy, if desire feels delayed, if you sense you were meant for more ease than you've known, this is not a punishment. It is a message. And tonight, you will finally learn how to read it. Here is the first truth that rearranges everything. You do not get what you want. You get what you accept as normal. Read that again in your own mind. Not what you wish for, not what you pray for in moments of desperation, but what feels natural to expect. This is why one person seems to walk through open doors while another pushes endlessly against locked ones. This is why affirmation without embodiment fails. This is why hope alone feels fragile. Florence taught that the subconscious mind is the womb of creation. It does not respond to pleading. It responds to assumption. What you assume to be true about love, money, health, opportunity solidifies into experience with the quiet certainty of gravity. And here is where most people unknowingly betray themselves. They say, "I want abundance," but inside they expect disappointment. They say, "I believe things will work out," but they prepare emotionally for failure. They speak faith with their lips while rehearsing fear with their imagination. The subconscious hears only the rehearsal. So let me ask you something gently, but honestly. When you imagine your future, does it feel safe to expect good, or does part of you brace, just in case? Right here, pause for a breath. And if this lands in your chest the way I suspect it does, leave a quiet declaration below. Nothing complicated. Just answer this truthfully. Comment one short sentence for what you're ready to expect now. No explanation, no story, just the expectation you are choosing to normalize. Now stay with me, because Florence did not teach struggle. She taught alignment. She taught that every desire carries its own appointed supply, that divine intelligence moves faster than fear, but only when fear stops interfering. You were never meant to force life. You were meant to signal it. And the signal is not effort. The signal is inner agreement. Most people think their problem is external. Not enough money, not enough time, not enough opportunity. But Florence would smile gently and say, "No, dear. The problem is that you are arguing with your own good." You see, when the mind is divided, results are delayed. When desire and expectation contradict each other, life stalls. And the division often hides in something very subtle, your self-concept. Not who you wish you were, not who you perform as, but who you quietly identify as when no one is watching. Do you see yourself as someone life supports, or someone who must struggle to deserve? Do you see yourself as guided, or as lucky only when circumstances allow? Florence insisted that identity is destiny. Say it slowly inside yourself. Identity is destiny. If you identify as someone who hopes, life gives you more hoping. If you identify as someone who waits, life keeps you waiting. But when you identify as someone who expects alignment, reality reorganizes itself with startling speed. Not dramatically, naturally. Here is where the modern mind resists. It says, "But I have to be realistic." Florence would answer, "Reality follows consciousness. Be realistic about that, because realism without faith is simply trained limitation. Now let me bring this into your hands right now in this moment. There is a reason the same patterns repeat in your life, the same financial ceilings, the same relationship dynamics, the same emotional cycles. It is not because you are broken, it is because you are consistent. Consistency is powerful, but only when it is aimed correctly. The subconscious mind loves routine. It loves familiarity. It loves what feels known. So if struggle feels familiar, if delay feels familiar, if disappointment feels familiar, the subconscious protects it as if it were safety. And safety, when misunderstood, becomes a cage. This is why Florence emphasized spoken word, because spoken word interrupts familiarity. It introduces a new pattern, not shouted, not forced, but stated with quiet authority. She taught that words spoken with conviction carry law, not emotional frenzy, not desperation, conviction. Which brings us here to something important. If you are ready to stop rehearsing the old story and begin installing a new inner rhythm, there is a reason we created the 21-day Dream Life Challenge, not as a gimmick, but as a structure. Because transformation does not happen through inspiration alone. It happens through daily alignment. For 21 days, you gently train your inner world to expect differently, to speak differently, to imagine with intention rather than fear. You'll find the link in the description or pinned comment. And if something in your chest just leaned forward when I said that, trust it. Now, let's go deeper. Florence taught that imagination is not fantasy, it is rehearsal. Every image you dwell on is a command. Every inner conversation is an instruction. You are always impressing something. The only question is what? If you imagine obstacles, you authorize them. If you imagine resolution, you permit it. This is not positive thinking. This is mental discipline. And discipline, once mastered, feels like peace. Here is a simple practice Florence lived by. Before sleep, when the mind is soft and receptive, she would imagine the end fulfilled. Not the struggle, not the journey, but the calm certainty of completion. Not excitement, not celebration, certainty. Because certainty is the language of creation. And now listen closely, this is vital. You do not need to convince the world. You do not need to convince anyone else. You need to convince your own inner ear. The moment your inner dialogue shifts from "I hope" to "of course," resistance begins to dissolve. And here is the quiet miracle. Life does not test you to punish you. It tests you to confirm who you believe you are. When circumstances wobble after a decision, that is not failure. That is alignment checking your consistency. Do you retreat, or do you remain inwardly unmoved? Florence would say, hold fast to the spoken word. And now, as we approach the next threshold of this journey, I want you to feel something, not understand it. There is an unseen force arranging paths on your behalf right now. Not because you deserve it, not because you earned it, but because you are finally learning how to agree with it. In the next movement of this narration, you will discover why resistance disguises itself as logic, why letting go feels terrifying before it feels free, and how one subtle inner shift collapses years of delay into moments of flow. Stay with me, because what comes next is where the old identity begins to dissolve, and the door you've always walked past opens from the inside. There comes a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when the old identity realizes it is no longer in control. It does not announce its departure. It does not slam the door. It simply loosens its grip. And most people miss this moment because they expect transformation to feel loud. Florence Scovel Shinn taught something profoundly unsettling to the ego. Real change feels strangely ordinary. When alignment begins, there is no thunder, no fireworks, just a subtle internal click, as if a lock you didn't know you were holding finally releases. This is why people so often abandon the process too early. They are waiting to feel different before they are different. But feeling follows assumption, not the other way around. Let me tell you something that may challenge everything you were taught about effort. The universe does not reward strain. It responds to clarity. Strain says, I don't trust life to meet me. Clarity says, I know where I am going. Florence understood this deeply. She watched people pray, affirm, visualize, yet secretly brace for disappointment. And she would gently say, you are canceling your own orders. Because every fearful expectation acts like a silent eraser. You cannot imagine success while emotionally preparing for failure and expect the subconscious to choose the higher image. It will always choose the one that feels safer. Now here is the great paradox. What feels familiar is not always what feels safe. For many, struggle has become familiar. Waiting has become familiar. Explaining has become familiar. So peace feels suspicious. Ease feels undeserved. Opportunity feels temporary. And life, obedient as ever, reflects that assumption. Florence called this the tyranny of appearances. Appearances say, nothing is changing. Faith says, something has already shifted. And faith, true faith, is not emotional. It is decided. This is where you stop asking, will this work? And begin asking, who am I being consistent with? Because consistency impresses the subconscious faster than intensity ever could. Let's speak plainly now. If your inner dialogue still sounds like justification, if this happens, then I'll relax. If I get confirmation, then I'll believe. If circumstances improve, then I'll trust. You are placing the cause after the effect. Florence reversed the equation. She taught that inner agreement comes first. Outer confirmation follows. Always. And this is where the modern mind protests. But what if I'm wrong? Florence would smile and say, what if you're right? The fear of disappointment has kept more people stuck than failure ever could, because disappointment still assumes desire. Fear abandons it entirely. Here is a question that deserves your honesty. What would you expect if you trusted life to support you? Not in theory, in practice. How would you walk? How would you speak? How would you decide? You don't need to act confident. You need to act congruent. Congruence is when your actions match your inner assumption. And here is where the shift accelerates. Florence taught that the subconscious responds to symbolic action. Small acts that say, I expect this to work. You clean a space for what hasn't arrived yet. You organize finances as if flow is normal. You prepare mentally for success instead of rehearsing excuses. These acts are not superstition. They are signals. Life responds to signals, not speeches. Now let me reignite your attention right here, because this matters deeply. The moment you stop emotionally leaning on the outcome leans toward you. Read that again internally. Desperation repels. Calm expectation attracts. Not because you stop caring, but because you stop needing the result to validate you. Florence taught that neediness is an admission of separation. Expectation is an admission of alignment. You are not trying to convince life. You are reminding yourself who you are. And now we approach something subtle but powerful. Many people think faith means holding on tighter. Florence taught that faith means letting go earlier, letting go of timing, letting go of control, letting go of the old inner arguments, not giving up, releasing interference. You don't dig up a seed every day to check if it's growing. You plant it and trust the intelligence beneath the soil. Your subconscious is that soil, and it is extraordinarily competent when you stop flooding it with doubt. Here is where the old identity fights back. It says, be careful. Don't expect too much. Protect yourself. But protection is not power. Florence would say, you cannot demonstrate faith and fear at the same time. One must yield. And yielding is not weakness. It is surrender to intelligence. Let me ground this again, because this is not philosophy. This is application. Tonight, when you finish listening, notice the first assumption your mind makes about tomorrow. Is it effort? Is it stress? Is it repetition? Or is it quiet confidence? That first assumption is the blueprint, and blueprints build realities. Now, pause with me here. If you feel the shift beginning, if something inside you is softening rather than tightening, anchor it. Leave a simple mark of agreement below, just a short phrase that matches this moment. Nothing poetic, nothing perfect. Something like what you are allowing now. Let it be brief. Let it be true, because declaration seals direction. Now, onward. Florence warned against something she called the sin of anxiety. Not moral sin, mental sin. Anxiety assumes a hostile universe. Faith assumes a cooperative one. Which do you live in? Because life mirrors the assumption without commentary. Here is the hidden freedom. You are not required to know how things resolve. You are only required to agree that they will. The how belongs to intelligence greater than effort, and the moment you release the burden of orchestration, you regain energy you forgot was yours. People often say, "I don't know how to relax." Florence would respond, "Then you don't yet trust." Trust is not passive. It is a decision to stop micromanaging reality. And now, listen carefully. This is one of the most important truths you will hear tonight. The subconscious does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you expect without argument. No debate, no justification, no inner eye roll. Expectation is calm. This is why repeating affirmations while feeling resistance creates fatigue. You are arguing with yourself. Florence taught that one quiet, accepted assumption outperforms 1,000 desperate declarations. So choose wisely what you normalize. Normalize ease. Normalize support. Normalize solutions appearing naturally. Not because you're naive, but because you are aligned. As this block closes, feel this, not intellectually, but internally. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not catching up. You are recalibrating. And recalibration feels unfamiliar before it feels natural. In the next movement, we will cross into the space where timing dissolves, where waiting ends, and where the promise hinted at in the beginning begins to reveal itself. Stay with me, because the most dangerous thing you can do right now is underestimate how quickly life moves once you stop resisting your own good. There is a moment, almost sacred, when time loosens its grip on you. You are no longer waiting, no longer chasing, no longer counting days like beads on a string. You are simply moving. Florence Scovel Shinn understood this moment well. She called it the collapse of delay. Not because things suddenly rush in with chaos, but because resistance quietly exits the room. Here is the truth most people are never told. Delay is not time. Delay is doubt wearing a clock. Time itself is neutral. It expands or contracts based on inner agreement. Have you ever noticed how some seasons of life feel endless, while others pass in a blink? That is not coincidence. That is consciousness. When the mind is divided, time drags. When the mind is unified, time obeys. Florence taught that once the subconscious accepts an assumption as fact, it begins arranging circumstances with startling efficiency. But here is where the old misunderstanding creeps in. People think alignment means passivity. They imagine sitting still while life delivers. That is not alignment. That is avoidance disguised as spirituality. Alignment is cooperative movement. You move, but without panic. You act, but without force. You decide, but without fear. Your actions become clean. And clean action is magnetic. Let me show you what clean action looks like. It looks like saying no without guilt. It looks like saying yes without apology. It looks like preparing without obsessing. It looks like trusting your intuition over your anxiety. Florence insisted that intuition is divine intelligence in motion. Anxiety is intelligence being mistrusted. Which one have you been listening to? Now listen closely. This is where many people lose their footing. When alignment begins, life often removes things before it adds new ones. This is not loss. This is clearance. Old patterns dissolve. Outdated relationships fade. Certain opportunities close quietly. And if you are not prepared, you may panic and think you made a mistake. Florence would say, "Do not mourn what leaves when it cannot follow you forward, because what cannot match your new assumption must exit." Life does not punish expansion. It reorganizes around it. This is why faith must be anchored before evidence appears. Evidence follows belief, not the reverse. And now, let me reawaken your attention right here, because this is a turning point. The moment you stop measuring progress by speed, you unlock momentum. Speed is ego-driven. Momentum is alignment-driven. Speed asks, "Why isn't this here yet?" Momentum says, "Of course this is unfolding." Florence taught that impatience is a vote of no confidence in divine order, not because wanting is wrong, but because urgency assumes lack, and lack is never the truth. It is a perception. Here is a practice Florence lived by, simple, powerful, and rarely practiced. When faced with uncertainty, she would say, "I place this in divine order," not as surrender to helplessness, but as recognition of intelligence beyond strain. And then she would act, not from fear, but from trust. This balance is everything. Too much control suffocates flow. Too much surrender stagnates action. Alignment lives in the middle. Now let's speak about identity again, but from a deeper angle. Earlier, you learned that identity shapes destiny. Now you will learn something more precise. Identity determines what feels reasonable to you, and reasonability governs your choices. If abundance feels unreasonable, you will unconsciously sabotage it. If ease feels suspicious, you will complicate things. If success feels temporary, you will brace instead of build. Florence taught that the goal is not to convince yourself, but to familiarize yourself. Familiarity breeds acceptance. Acceptance breeds embodiment. So ask yourself, without judgment, what still feels unreasonable to expect? Support? Joy? Consistency? Financial ease? Emotional stability? Wherever your mind hesitates, that is where alignment is being invited. Not forced, invited. Now here is the part that changes everything if you let it. You do not need to fix yourself to receive. You need to stop withholding permission. Florence was radical in this way. She taught that worthiness is not earned, it is assumed. The universe does not check your resume. It responds to your self-concept. And self-concept is revealed not in what you say, but in what you allow. Do you allow yourself to receive without explanation? Do you allow things to work out without apology? Do you allow joy without bracing for loss? Allowance is a frequency, and frequency determines response. Now, another truth that deserves your full attention. Life does not ask, "What do you want?" It asks, "What are you ready to live with?" This is why toleration is so powerful. What you tolerate persists. What you expect evolves. Florence warned that complaining is agreement with delay, not because frustration is wrong, but because repetition cements perception. So if you are serious about transformation, be serious about what you rehearse. Rehearse solutions, rehearse calm, rehearse fulfillment, not as fantasy, but as mental hygiene. You clean your body daily. Your mind deserves the same respect. Now let's bring this to a moment of decision. If you have been listening carefully, you may feel something subtle shifting. Not excitement, not fear, but recognition. As if part of you is remembering a role you once knew how to play. That is no accident. Florence believed memory is not just about the past. It is about truth resurfacing. And here is the hook that opens the final movement of this journey. What if the life you are waiting for is waiting for you to stop preparing? What if readiness has already been achieved and only permission remains? What if the delay was never about timing, but about agreement? Sit with that. Because in the final movement, we will bring everything together, not in theory, not in motivation, but in integration. You will see how the promise from the very beginning is fulfilled, why nothing was ever missing, and how to step forward without hesitation, force, or fear. Stay, because what comes next is not about becoming someone new. It is about finally living as who you already are. There is a quiet relief that comes when you finally stop trying to become. Becoming is exhausting. Becoming implies distance. Becoming assumes you are not yet enough. Florence Scovel Shinn did not teach becoming. She taught revealing. She taught that everything you seek is already encoded within you, waiting not for effort, but for permission. And permission is not granted through struggle. It is granted through agreement. This is the promise hinted at in the beginning of our journey, the hidden truth behind the unseen door you've walked past all your life. Nothing has been withheld from you. You have only been trained to postpone yourself. Think about that. Postponement looks responsible. It sounds mature. It wears the mask of patience. But often it is just fear wearing manners. Fear of disappointment, fear of being wrong, fear of stepping forward without guarantees. Florence would gently but firmly say, faith does not wait for guarantees. Faith is the guarantee. And here is where the journey resolves. You are not here to force life into submission. You are here to cooperate with it. Cooperation begins when inner conflict ends. No more arguing with your desires. No more justifying your dreams. No more shrinking expectations to avoid pain. Pain does not come from wanting. It comes from resisting what you want while pretending you don't. This is why pretending contentment never brings peace. True peace comes from alignment, when what you desire, expect, and allow finally agree. Florence believed that the soul knows exactly what it is meant to express. Desire is not temptation, it is instruction. So if something keeps returning to your mind, a vision, a calling, a different way of living, that is not distraction. That is direction. And now, let me say this slowly so it can land where it needs to land. You do not need to push your life forward. You need to stop holding it back. Holding back looks like overthinking. Holding back looks like waiting for confidence. Holding back looks like needing permission from the past. But the past has no authority here. Florence taught that the only moment of power is now, because now is where assumption lives. You cannot assume yesterday. You cannot assume tomorrow. You can only assume now. And assumption is creative. So what are you assuming right now about yourself? That you're still figuring it out? That you're almost ready? That someday you'll feel worthy, prepared, confident? Or that you are already aligned with intelligence greater than fear? This is where the old story ends. Not with drama, not with finality, but with choice. A calm, grounded choice. To live as someone who expects life to respond. Florence said, "The game of life is a game of boomerangs. What you send out returns multiplied." But she also taught something even more radical. You don't send with effort. You send with state. Your state of being is the message. A hurried state sends hurry. A fearful state sends obstacles. A calm, expectant state sends opportunity. So let your nervous system relax into this truth. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not catching up. You are arriving. Arriving at coherence. Arriving at trust. Arriving at yourself. This is why the door opens now. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped leaning against it. And as it opens, there is no fanfare, just recognition. A sense that says, oh, this is what was always meant. Carry this forward, not as inspiration, but as posture. Stand differently in your inner world. Speak differently to yourself. Expect without bracing. Let life surprise you with ease. And when old doubts resurface, as they sometimes will, do not fight them. Simply return to alignment, return to assumption, return to calm authority, because the universe does not respond to force. It responds to familiarity. Make ease familiar. Make support familiar. Make fulfillment familiar. And watch how quickly life agrees. And now, as we close this journey, I want you to sit with one final knowing. The promise has already been delivered, not in something new you gained, but in something you released. You released the belief that life must be convinced. You released the habit of postponement. You released the old agreement with limitation. And in doing so, you remembered who you are. Someone life responds to, someone supported by intelligence, someone whose inner word carries authority. The door is open. Step through, not tomorrow, not someday, but now, and let life do what it has always been waiting to do. Meet you where you finally stand.